welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Barca with Andy Lipson and Kenny Cepeda. On today's show, we will be discussing maybe some climate action policies, but mostly centering our subject will be around the COP25, or the United Nations Climate Conference that happens every year. And this is the 25th one that is happening in Madrid, Spain. And it was supposed to happen in Chile, in Santiago, Chile, but because, we'll get into the reasons why it got moved, but we will be discussing, is it worth it? Does it matter? And what action is being taken around climate change. And will be a discussion of three, see where our positions lie here. So,
and why is Kenny here?
Well, I because Kenny has to contribute.
I thought he was a Latin American correspondent.
Right? Apparently, yeah, they want to put me in a box. I refuse.
Exactly.
I should mention too that this is also the very last episode I will be doing of this year. This year, I will come back next year. I'm gone from to Spain and France.
Next week, it may just be me and Kenny.
Mm-hmm.
So Kenny may feature more regularly on our What's Left.
I'd like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Talk pay.
yeah. But you had actually said that when you heard we were talking about COP25, you would express interest in being involved in this episode.
More than anything about the whole topic of climate change, and what does socialism have to say about this? Really digging in and see what's really happening under all this, and what are the expectations or possibilities out of what has already happened for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
Longer.
More than 30 years, for sure. Since the scientists have known, more than 30 years, for sure.
Yeah.
Since Exxon, that's where really they did their own scientific research on climate change.
But I think that these conferences started, in 1992.
Yeah. I interrupted you.
No, it's
Go ahead.
No, so I don't know. Question: what's happening? What's happening in the world?
And what would we? It'll be. I'm not sure exactly what the activists are asking for, but I think what do we make of the solutions that are on offer? What would our solutions be? I think those are the things that I think about.
We'll be discussing the actors behind the climate change movement, right? And
possibly.
Yeah. Okay.
So what's COP25? Maybe.
COP25 is the shorthand for the United Nations Climate Change Conference, and it happens every year, and every country hosts it. But the one in Paris, that one was the most pivotal one of all of the conferences, because countries really had to. I think it was the second or third of that conference, and they really had to sit down and negotiate what they were going to do. Every country was going to do to reduce their carbon emissions, or to go as possible or down the meter of zero carbon emissions, because climate change is widely, at least for this conference, I'm not going to speak about if there are alternatives, but climate change is largely understood as being mostly from carbon dioxide, a greenhouse effect that is happening, or as the infamous global warming, it was called at one point by Al Gore.
Right. Specifically due to human carbon production.
Yeah.
And I assume these are the most powerful countries coming to the table?
Yes.
Economically?
But also the smallest countries, except in the beginning, I think it was few, like Nicaragua, chose to opt out. And then there were, but one thing, before I go on.
And the only other thing, the big claim to fame for what they've accomplished so far was I think what was called the Kyoto Protocol.
Yes, that was the other one too. Yeah,
and which was really a system of a cap and trade system of carbon emission reduction through a market-based system.
Market solution to a problem.
Like a carbon tax.
No, not a carbon tax.
It's like
carbon tax is not a
All right.
You could trade the right to pollute, basically. You had certain companies, I think, had a certain amount of pollution that they could sell in a market or trade with another company. So basically, just selling the right to pollute.
Right. And the idea was that it would push, and then countries that were under-polluting, which would tend to be the developing countries in the South, they were saying, oh, this is going to spur incentive for investment in those countries, because then for them to develop in a cleaner way than the West has done. I'm just beginning here, but effectively what it has meant is a scheme by which the West one uses a market method to solve a problem created by the market, and call that a solution. And secondly, it has actually meant that those countries which could benefit from developing, whether they would develop through coal or what have you, the developing countries are somewhat encouraged to resist such development, instead essentially just try to draw in money from the Western countries for whatever plans allow them to offset the extra carbon that they're doing here in the West. Now that's only for the countries that agree to it, and that's just Europe. And Europe agreed to it, but only 50% of their industries actually even fall subject to it. And so this other idea of like offsets, which is if I overpollute, then I can invest in somebody who's underpolluting, or sell my pollution to somebody who's underpolluting, give them money. And there's just all sorts of fraud that's potential in this.
And do you know if there were any like penalties, or what was the process of holding people accountable to meeting those quotas? If they do you know? I don't know.
I was confused, and it was something else earlier, and I apologize. So I don't remember this. I do remember there was a Kyoto project, but protocol. But I don't remember all of the details. Right?
And because one of the things,
I cannot speak to the penalization.
One of the things that people who were critical of the cap and trade method was, well, let's go do a straight carbon tax, and that has not been agreed to by any country. And in fact, as I understand it, the whole notion of turning this into a market plan for solving it, does come from Al Gore and the dude from Enron, were some of the initial creators of this idea of how do we incentivize market growth with using a green label. And I don't believe it can possibly work, and I believe it's fraudulent. So the U.S. won't participate in it because they're not going to be held to it, but really no one's held to it because
it's voluntary.
And that's sort of my opinion about these, COP25, these meetings where they come with resolutions, verbal agreements to, do something, and expect governments to, get behind it. But there is no real accountability. There is no real, binding, structures. They just really pledge. We'll do our best, and hope for the best. And they meet, and then they parade a bunch of like interest in solving this issue, but ultimately to me it's just a show, and nothing real can come out of that. And I think that they also perpetuate certain lies about climate change. And for example, one thing that gets omitted greatly from the debate about climate change, and I bet you, I haven't paid attention, to be honest, much to the COP25.
It hasn't really been reported on a lot.
No.
Yeah.
But
if you listen to Democracy Now!, maybe you would have been listening to it.
I'm sure.
But
I don't hear it.
I think you should look here.
For example, one thing that gets omitted from the conversation about climate change is that the U.S. military is one of the biggest polluters in the world. This machinery, I read some stuff, pollutes more than 140 countries combined. I mean, so, if we are really serious about eliminating climate change, we have to stop this machinery, which is one branch of capitalism. And so, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I want to be very clear. I want to make sure we have an agreement where we understand that there is destruction and a crisis on our planet? Is it something that I'm
Oh,
curious
there-
with both of
yeah,
you.
I think capitalism will destroy the planet.
Yes.
Do I think it will destroy the planet by raising the temperature due to human carbon production? That ain't the way that I'm seeing it go down. I think the environmental destruction that will happen is through nuclear war, through the kinds of things Kenny's talking about. I personally believe that just looking at carbon as the singular thing by which we understand the destruction of the environment is very narrow, lets the capitalists off the hook, and allows them to use these cap and trade schemes to turn carbon into a derivative that can be sold on the market, and put greening under capitalism. Because I actually think the way capitalism destroys the environment is much more diverse and varied, and I think it's caused environmental activists to see everything narrowly through the lens of just carbon up or carbon down,
Yeah.
which I do not think actually puts a real picture of the nature of the destruction of the planet due to the environment, making the planet not unlivable for humans at least. And first, obviously, the poorest are going to face the most, narrowly through the lens of just of the amount of carbon that the U.S. is pumping into these companies are pumping into the environment.
I mean, that's I think one thing where we might like differ a little. I don't know. Obviously, war is a constant threat, especially as we are moving to a more nationalistic world again, and like capitalists fighting each other, and coming to a halt. And obviously, nature or the resources will put some pressures, or add new resources to fight for, rather than just petroleum. The obvious one is water. I mean, the U.S. has military bases like in Paraguay on top of aquifers. The Bush family, right before they left office, they bought like 300,000 acres of land over an aquifer in Paraguay, and there is a military base right next to it. And there's also big reserves of gas, down there. So, obviously our government or the people, the ruling class, they understand, they think years ahead, they plan 10, 20, 30 years ahead. And that's why, you see the Bush preparing for that, or the U.S. military, having a presence in, again, the biggest reserves of water, aquifers in the world, in South America. And so that would definitely put a pressure. It might lead to nuclear war. But I do think that, climate change is something to keep an eye on, because if war doesn't destroy us, that will definitely come. And I happen to think that we are lied to all the time about this. We see constant news that revising projection, and it's because there's a consensus created. I think in academia, that the people that are too radical, too scary, give real numbers, they don't want that, because obviously there's a lot of money involved in this. And so we are lied to all the time by our government. Obviously, I think this is another aspect where we're being lied to. For one, one way the climate change is talked about is that it's changing like at a constant rate instead of an exponential compounding, issues that, I think just like a recession, we can't see it, until 3 quarters after when it's official. But we felt it for 3 quarters. This might be one of those things too, that we are seeing shit happening, in Australia, in Brazil, Greenland, in places that we don't see.
Here in California with the fires.
Sure, but even like places, like a lot of the climate change that I think I read is happening in the fringes of societies. Like in Greenland, in Antarctica, glaciers melting. And then the ice cap, getting smaller and protecting us less from the sun and absorbing more heat. And it's this thing that is compounding. I don't know. I think in this also our government, obviously they have an investment or an interest in burying this news. Last year, 2018, for Thanksgiving, Black Friday, a government agency, I don't know which, released a report that showed a very horrible picture of the future of the economy in the U.S. and just in the U.S. But it got buried on Black Friday because no one's really paying attention. And so yeah, that's my concern. Like I do see conflict. It can rise at any moment, but that is coming, and that's something that our generation and those behind us will be saddled with if we don't destroy it by nuclear war. And so, But I don't know. I can go on,
Yeah,
but if you
I
want,
think the causes of climate change, the conversations around the causes of climate change are shifting. And you said something I want to just address. You said that it's narrowing, or the lens of just through carbon dioxide, right? It's this carbon effect that is happening.
Mm-hmm.
The conversations are definitely shifting now, and I'm hearing it from all of the sources that I listen, that are people on the ground, they're talking to people. It is about agriculture, right? Because it's the number one polluter in this planet. It is
industrial.
yes, and it's about the military, it's about our consumption use, it is about the way that we are treating the land, and just a development that is happening, right, and overpopulation. And that one is a challenging one, because when we talk about overpopulation, I don't mean that this world cannot hold all of us. I mean that there are concentrated areas where people are being neglected, and then they don't have the resources. And richer countries take a lot of the resources from the smaller developing countries, and then you have them scarced, no? And so I'm not advocating, by the way, to saying that we shouldn't have any more children. But I just want to be clear, because I know that there are climate change activists out there that are starting to push back against that overpopulation myth about how much our planet can hold, back in the early 2000s and 90s.
The population bomb was
Right.
was talked about in the late 60s,
Yeah.
and was a racist,
So-
kind of left.
Right. So
racist.
that's why I want to be clear, and I clear on this episode about that. So I am. So this is what what you're alluding to, Andy, is something that is now slowly changing. That it isn't so much about the carbon now. It's about so many things, including nuclear war, that can affect our planet, like what happened in Chernobyl, right, with radiation.
Yeah.
So I think that climate activists are now very aware that it's more than just one thing. I think that was more the narrative that the global warming activists had. So I think this climate change movement are coming in waves.
Sure.
And the very first wave back in the 60s were about like animals and plants and wildlife, right? Mm-hmm. Then you have the other wave that is coming, which is about just the greenhouse effect. And now this new wave, which is about a lot of things that we're doing as a society are actually destroying the planet, because as I'm seeing more and more, people are saying of capitalism, globalization, because of the market that is happening to extract resources from one place and then deliver it to other people that are more wealthy. And I think that is now more of the conversation today. So that when you ask like what are they demanding or what is going on, it's shifting now. It is shifting now.
Do you
What
think
people are looking at as the causes for climate change? That are people are even changing the word now. It used to be global warming, climate change, and now global disaster or catastrophe. I mean, I'm not sure about those terminology, but even the crisis, just in general, that we are in a crisis, that you hear this reverberation of this word crisis, is now the new wave.
I happen to kind of lean on this on your side a little, in
About
that
what?
at the narrow scope of environmentalists, or just people in general, like that have different fights, like they see these isolated things as oh, we are environmentalists, but and then like I only worry about immigrants, but as if these things are not connected,
But I think that's the reason what I'm saying is that the people are seeing that things are interconnected now.
Well,
Things are now at a what you call intersectional now. That they see that people are like, I was just listening to a report today that women are being sold off as brides at an early age because of climate change.
Yeah.
There is immigration that is happening because of climate change. So I think these things are not being ignored anymore as it used to be.
But that's what I see as a problem. I think that we are just focusing on climate change when the real monster here is capitalism. Capitalism has created this and that, and then we're not having these conversations in these forums, world forums, where people dance around the subject and not saying capitalism is the problem. And then the only debate becomes, can we reform it or can we abolish it?
I think it's birthing of it, because Naomi Klein talks about the capitalism actually, and she's a big environmentalist. So I think and she is one of the most prominent figures in the climate change movement as an environmentalist. So again, I think that it's shifting, and we're seeing the beginnings of it. And someone that is attuned to some like these news outlets that are happening on the ground right now, like what's happening at the COP25 right now, where people are actually overwhelming the conference and taking over platforms, literally taking over mics and shutting down places and shutting down the rallies where indigenous people are shutting down rallies, even liberal rallies. And so I think, again, it's shifting. It is shifting, and I want to give credit to that movement.
For example, like I've attended some fundraisers here where the Sunrise Movement, it's like one of the most radical groups supposedly. That basically they came up with the Green New Deal, and Ocasio-Cortez hijacked it. But even then, that is like listening to them, I was turned off right away because they were pushing for the democratic debate to include talks about or the topic of climate change, and they were thrown out. And yet at these fundraisers, they were bashing the Republicans, but they were bringing this up, but still getting behind the Democrats as if Obama wasn't part of the process of making the U.S. the biggest oil producer, which last year the U.S. became, and so then what are we talking about? These partisan BS. Right.
No, I understand, and I think the justification, I'm not justifying, but I'm only explaining. I want to be clear, because then later on, I had got good feedback from you when we did an episode. It sounded like I came off a certain way, so I want to be really recalcando algo. I want to really clarify, make sure I have a position. I'm not justifying the Sunrise. I don't go for Just Sunrise or 350.org, or I don't support any of the leading climate change organizations. I simply am explaining something, and I will explain this. At least the Democrats, this is their justification. The Democrats are the only ones that are trying to do something. I'm not saying that it's enough. I'm not saying I agree with it. Let me finish. Let me finish. So they are the only ones acknowledging the science, right? The Republicans, the vast majority of Republicans do not acknowledge the science.
Sure.
The vast majority of Republicans do not want to do any policy around it, whether it be reducing or carbon tax or anything like that. And the only ones speaking about that are the Democrats. This is the reason why the Democrats and they could be using it to their political advantage. Yes, they are. I'm not saying, though, that I'm in agreement. I'm simply saying that they're the only ones, AOC is the only one that is backing a Green New Deal. Right. At least a Green New Deal.
Right.
And the Republicans, you don't have diddly squat for that.
Right. But that you are basically saying that the Democrats, maybe it's weak tea, but you're saying the Democrats are at least trying to do something.
But there's tea.
No, but I'm
saying... You're going to say weak tea, there's tea. And there isn't any tea for Republicans.
They're both pouring poison into the environment.
They're both.
No, they're both guilty of it.
Yeah.
And the Green New Deal is going to actually, like it's done in
Can you mention a Republican that is at least wanting to say something about climate change?
It doesn't matter.
Can you mention one at least? I can mention a few. Can you mention a few Republicans? I'm just curious.
I don't think it doesn't matter to me. Why does it matter?
You can't mention one.
No,
right?
I don't.
It doesn't come up
because it doesn't matter.
Because you have a few other Democrats that can, right?
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. That is the difference.
But there's no difference in terms of the people whether they acknowledge it or not.
I'm not a Democrat myself.
Of course you are.
You can say that, but I'm just telling you that I'm only saying that at least they acknowledge it and the science is acknowledged, whereas people like Trump, on the Republican side, call it a hoax. So, I mean, that is the difference.
It's no difference, because both...
You don't see a difference between someone backing...
not when both of them are completely dedicated to destroying the environment.
They are Band-Aid policies.
They're not Band-Aid policies. I didn't call... You're calling them Band-Aids.
I'm calling them Band-Aids.
I'm calling them destruction of the environment. Do you understand that?
They can...
No, they're not.
No, I know, because they're still operating under capitalism, and that's where we do agree. That is where we do agree.
We don't agree.
But we agree...
You think the Green New Deal offers...
No, I did not say that.
Somewhat of a solution or a Band-Aid. You call it a Band-Aid. I'm calling it a plan for destroying the environment.
I agree with you that capitalism is the source of this. Yes, I did. And we had this episode and we discussed it, where there is no solution outside of within capitalism to solve this climate crisis. What I will say, though, the difference is that they will acknowledge it. And that's the only thing I will say.
Where is the value there? That's what I'm curious about. Where is the value of acknowledging?
The value, I'll state it. I've stated that before. The value is here, where if you have protected lands, like we do here in California, he knows my argument. Mm-hmm. If we have protected lands here in California, at least until we have una revolución that can happen here, at least these are temporarily being taken care of. If we at least vote for some of the policies to protect certain lands, then these lands will at least not be destroyed. And do you know how long it takes for redwoods to grow?
Sure, but
redwoods take a very long time, and only the Democrats so far have taken care of it. Well, so far, I'm not saying that Republicans have, because I will give credit to Teddy Roosevelt.
And
that
Richard
wasn't him.
Nixon
But I'm
created
saying,
the
and
Environmental
yes, he did
Protection
create it. But I'm saying even those, I will give them credit to, at least because they did it. They did it. Our lands were protected minimally and not destroyed completely. And had those policies not been in place, they would have been destroying them completely. Yes?
But
No.
Yes, they would have.
They're doing them anyway.
They are, but at a slower pace, and there's obstacles.
Well,
there are obstacles to it.
Go ahead.
So I mean, what good
Dios
is it?
mío, we're already. I knew this was going to happen, so I brought my tea.
The problem is that there are no obstacles in your vision, because your vision says that our enemy, which is the Democrats, are our enemy on this question.
No.
They're the capitalists. Offer us some small salve. The degree. See, there's a problem for Naomi Klein. Naomi Klein tells these nations to go to there, and she says, "You must do something, nations. You must come together and figure out what this is a calamity that affects us all." But that in itself is a myth, because that's not how capitalism operates. It's a competitive system that pits all these countries against one another. To ask them to go to these conferences and come up with a solution is like
They are not the solution. I agree with that. They are not the solution.
And that's the Democrats and Republicans. All of them are not the solution. And so one of the major problems is that people believe that there are partial solutions to this problem, and there are no partial solutions to be found. Capitalism has to be gotten rid of completely, and you have to understand that the major party of capitalism right now is actually probably more the Democratic Party than the Republican Party. They're the one pushing for war with Russia. They're the ones pushing for war with Syria.
I understand.
They're the ones,
and they're definitely not any angels. But
no,
if
it's
I
not
can
angels.
have,
They're enemies.
Yeah, you're right. And I will say this though, this is where I feel sometimes and I'm curious where Kenny stands with this, but I sometimes feel, Andy, that you want to go to this extremity where if we don't at least hold back some of the destruction on our sacred lands, and from building dams, from destroying our beautiful natural forests like in Brazil or here in California, if we don't at least have some buffer and I feel like I am part of that resistance until you get your revolutionaries together and topple down the system so that these places but if we don't have it during this time, then they will be destroyed, and they will not be there for us when we finally can have a revolution, which I'm for. When it comes, I will hop on it, but for now I feel like there are a lot of us that, like myself, that are trying to hold back the cutting as we're slowly being pushed back. Yes.
Right. And you're propping up the Democratic Party doing it, but go ahead.
So that's where I see that's where I see a fallacy in thinking that we will have these lands that will be there, this water will be there, these trees will be there, but while they're at the same time extracting all this oil, right, and burning it, and using the military machinery to burn that, like 40% of our, the oil we consume in this country is for the military. So
why can't we be for the same cause? That's the thing. Why can't I be for the same cause? Why can't we just vote for protect this for however many years and join also this other cause?
That will keep kicking the can down the road.
Yep.
So ultimately for me, the solution is we have to reconquer political power, the working class. Because we are living in a corporate dictatorship. Our states, we live in capitalist states. They serve these corporations. They save profit. They save money. So, can you trust them that they will actually make things that is not just to give you a candy because we're crying. So we have to get on or we won't. We have to get on and push, and push for that. For me, it's about adaptation at this point. It's not even about saving it. It's adaptation, and the biggest adaptation we can do is a new economic system, and
and I agree with that. Why it's just like saying, both of you seem like you're both saying, and I hope our listeners and viewers actually take to this and they comment about these two here. But it's like, why can't we do both? Is what I'm curious about.
Sure,
why can't we?
Sure.
Oh, so sure.
No. This is what I'm saying. Doing both is reconquering political power. Because how can you trust that that the government is gonna apply things that are beneficial for nature and for us. Any government, really.
And that the record is
I mean,
clear. You can't do both.
Obama didn't. Sorry to interrupt, but where was Obama protecting? Or that administration protecting our environment where they became the biggest oil producer in the country?
I wouldn't say Obama was protecting, but he certainly was not dismantling policies that were endangering our. For example, Alaska, where there was specific areas that weren't supposed to be drilled. Those policies were maintained under the Obama administration, which I know he is not perfect, but those were, as soon as Trump got in office, pipelines.
No, but that's a mistake. This was a process that started with Obama and continued with Trump.
The policies specifically to Alaska, and I remember this, were in place.
No, sure, I get that.
In place to not drill.
But the overall result was that
that is a Democrat.
Sure.
And those are Democrats
but
constantly know that they'll be...
But guess what? We're not going to have ice anymore because we started drilling somewhere else. Because, they didn't do it officially.
Sure. I understand. That happened in the Gulf of Mexico.
Then the proof shows that they're not for the environment. They pay lip service to this. The Green New Deal is a capitalist solution to this. It's a market solution, basically.
I understand that.
So it's a pipe dream, and even then,
But you have a player here, Republican players, who decide, let's just destroy everything.
The Democrats want to destroy everything as long as they get rich doing it.
The Democrats don't destroy everything.
Yes, they do. They make more war than the Republicans do.
You're always talking about war. Why don't you talk about... I'd like to hear something about the
then
national
I can look
parks.
At healthcare.
How about you speak about the national parks? Are they destroying the national parks?
Yes, they're destroying the national parks.
Which ones?
Because Bill Clinton and Al Gore, when he wanted to reconstruct the U.S. government and made it less... when he was redefining the U.S. government, he made all these jobs, he liquidated a bunch of jobs that were part of the government regulating a lot of these areas, whether it was the environment, whether it was taxes, all that kind of stuff. That happened under Clinton and Gore.
There is the Pipeline XL that all Republicans are for building, and there are Democrats as well. I'm simply saying that all of the presidential candidates have said that they would very much try. I hate the word try because it doesn't mean anything to me.
It doesn't mean anything. They're not trying.
But Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have said that they would not approve of the Pipeline XL. You see? Of any more construction of the pipeline.
Can they commit to decrease the military? Can they commit to stop
Bernie
drilling?
Sanders has said that. Yes, he has. To decrease. I'm simply saying that the conversation is being had, and you can debate these things, and you can fight them about it, than you can with Republicans who don't even care.
But ultimately, I think...
debate them.
But even then, it doesn't matter whether you can debate them on that. We don't have the political power to do anything.
Out there can you have that is going to listen to you about it? They're just going to shut down the conversation.
But again, does it even matter? We can debate one or the other. One that pays lip service, or the other one's straight up upfront monster. When we as voters, we don't have the power to actually make them do the things they say they're gonna do.
That's what capitalism means,
and that's what jumping behind the Democrats means. A dead end, pipe dream, and keep kicking that.
I should be clear. I'm not voting Democrat. I'm simply saying. Right, I'm only just.
But there's no other logic behind yours because you're saying why?
What other logic? I cannot say it
because you can't do. Yes, you can, but you can't do both. You ask why can't you do both?
No, I want to vote for policies that if there are propositions.
But you won't get that
propositions.
You don't get the right to vote on policies. You vote on candidates, and you're
going to get. We can vote for candidates, but they're also
you're going to get capitalist ones,
and they betray you once they're in place.
Or they tell you straight to your face.
There are local propositions that you can vote for that the people
Eduardo,
get.
You're just changing the conversation now. You're going down to Prop I or Prop G somewhere in San Francisco, which has nothing to do with the scale of the problems we're talking about.
No, I understand.
Okay, so let's stay here focused on actually a global issue that capitalism is destroying the environment, something we don't disagree with, but you don't understand that the Democratic Party is a pro-capitalist.
I said that already.
Well, then why are you telling us that there's anything there for us? There's nothing. Hold on. If you understand that they are just as committed to destroying the environment because they're pro-capitalist, they don't hate the environment. I'm sure they make nice lip service about it, but they have to be just as committed to destroying the environment because they're a big business pro-capitalist party.
I understand that.
So there's nothing there for us. They can tell us we can debate with them, but that's just fooling us. They're gaslighting us, thinking that they're listening. When the reality is, if this conference was held anywhere, they moved it from Chile because there's an uprising going on there. That's where that conference has to happen. It has to happen and be taken over by workers there, and all the companies have to be taken over by workers. That's what has to happen. All those capitalists have to be thrown out. So that's the only solution to this. And that's the one thing that's not on offer. And you don't, and by saying the Democrats...
I back all of the protesters that are marching in Madrid, that are marching here in the USA right now because of the COP25 in solidarity, and the people who are taking over, occupying parts of the conference at the COP25. Those are the people I back. And I think sometimes when we talk about this, you tend to, and I apologize, and I feel like even I don't want to get the wrong read here, but I want to make sure that I'm not reading this wrong. But I feel as ¿cómo se catalogan? Like you categorize. Thank you. You categorize them under the democratic wing, and I have a sense that you do that. Is this my read?
Certainly in the United States, yes. The people who I'm paying attention to, who are following this, who are advocates of the Green New Deal, who are saying that
because I don't think that's fair.
Who are very critical of the fact that Trump got out of these. They're basically, oh my God, look what Trump has done. He's gotten out of this conference. There's no solution to be found in this conference. Yeah. So whether he's there or whether you get some Democrat to tell you, oh, I'm going there. They did that in 2017. Basically, what was it? COP17 was the one where they really amped up the cap and trade stuff under a Democrat, under
honestly,
Obama.
To me, like even like when Trump pulled out of the Paris Agreement, it becomes about personality politics, because in reality that agreement wasn't doing anything. It wasn't a solution.
It was help. It's another pro-West, pro-imperialist. Sure. Economic grab for the big power countries. In fact, one of the things that the left was trying to do is get the African nations to stand up to them, and they tried to, but they got fucking blasted. And so the left started saying, "We need the U.S. out. The U.S. has to go away, and Europe has to impose a solution on the United States." Well, now the U.S. is out, and good luck imposing a solution. That's not how capitalism works. These are competitive countries. They all hate each other. Ultimately, Britain is not a friend of the United States. Germany is not a friend of the United States. All of these are deeply at war with one another. The only thing they are united in is a deep hatred of the working class in their respective countries, and not ever letting those people believe that they can run their own world on their own interests. Yeah. And anyone who says that the Democrat is going to help us get there is an enemy of the working class, because they're basically fooling the working class into believing there's a partial solution or even a momentary hedge against this. Let's be clear. The first moment there's another economic crisis, even let it not a war, all this shit goes away. When everyone suddenly is like, oh my God, there's no profits immediate in China, there's no profits immediate in the United States or France or Germany, you think they're going to be worried about any sort of cap or emission caps that aren't even, aren't even regulated in any way or aren't even enforced in any way? No. Capitalism doesn't give two shits about caps. It cares about one thing, profits. And that's the only thing they're turning this carbon thing into.
This is where we are in agreement, and yet it seems like you paint me as if I'm not in agreement with that.
You aren't, because you keep proposing, you think there's two ways to do this. You think we can go halfway with the Democrats and then we'll veer up at the end. It doesn't work that way. This is how we've landed ourselves in this situation.
I believe in buffers.
I know, but this is how we've landed in this situation that brought us Donald Trump, is continuing to go halfway with the Democrats, thinking that it's a buffer from fascism, a buffer from racism, a buffer from war, when it doesn't operate that way.
To
we have to wrap up soon. Go ahead.
It also becomes the debate or the conversation about, change from the top, change from the bottom. Because here we have these messiahs that come and they're going to tell us how to change, or they promise to change the world, but ultimately to me boils down for us to having the political power, capacity to change things. If my company doesn't want to change their ways, we'll fucking strike, because it's affecting us. If we got to change our ways, but try to tell a company that's run by some capitalists, they'll just fire you. So it becomes about us, the working class, getting political power and able to affect and solve all the wrongs that we're trying to solve that are connected.
And laying hold of something that's a standard Marxist thing, of the means of production. Yes. That is, laying hold of the tools and using them for our own interests, not in the interest of profit. There's only one way to do that. There's no road through the Democratic Party, no temporary road. In fact, the Democratic Party is a capitalist trick to make sure that never happens. And it's worked magically in the United States. And it's working in Britain too. You can see with even Corbyn, he's out, right? And now we're going to see a far right rise, in relationship to this, and it's going to mean another amping up of, the right wing in Europe being strengthened, because the left continues to lie to the working class about what really is going to make a solution. And anytime we try to present Ocasio-Cortez or Green New Deal or Bernie Sanders or Democrat anything to the working class as even a stopgap measure, we are lying to ourselves, and we're lying to the class that needs to make this revolution.
All right, let's take a break here. Let's take a break. We'll come back to what's left. We just took a short break. We should do breaks in the episodes. I like that. And put music in between. People like that. Did you know podcasts really do that?
I didn't know that.
Counterpunch.
They put
radio. Yeah.
They do music in between, like 30-second music.
I think whatever can make this podcast more like Democracy Now! Or KPFA can only improve it. I'm sincere in saying that. Can you not tell from my voice?
All right, let's
Go ahead,
continue. It gives us to un momento para respirar, for breathing, for like relaxation. All right, because otherwise the things escalate here.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So I was saying earlier that who I back are not the Democrats. I back I back and give credit to the people behind the movement, the indigenous people that are at COP25 and who are here as well, and that are delivering the message about destroying sacred lands. And I back the youth, because the youth and this generation are really starting to wake up, and they're starting to see that their future isn't looking very optimistic. It's not very optimistic to look. It's looking quite bleak unless you have money. And this country, this world should be really for all of us. And I think that that's what they're really pointing to. It's that this generation is really getting a chance to speak up before it's too late. Whether we think it's through carbon emissions or, whatever, whatever we are doing to this planet, we are doing something, and we're doing it in a way that is destroying the planet. So the youth are waking up to this, and they're being aware of this, and they really do have a voice. And one of those who is not a Democrat, and I want to give some credit to, is Greta, right? Who we haven't even discussed it on this show, and I know you know. So I don't know if you want to give any thought on what I just mentioned on the youth.
I mean,
indigenous people. People are really families that are concerned for their kids.
I definitely, I see value in this and what we're doing right now, in talking and fleshing out these ideas, and beliefs, and I think it needs to happen. I feel that is my current role, in whatever is happening. I'm like a digger. I'm trying to dig the past, trying to dig the ideas out, because like I've said in the last episode, I think we've been robbed of understanding and misguided, and the youth are revolting. Obviously, people are revolting. It doesn't mean end in something better, especially if we don't have the ideas, the understanding of what's happening. And again, and I do not endorse talking down to people. Like, I was there, I was that liberal Democrat. I went to Obama's inauguration, but I've learned my lessons, and we'll talk more about that.
Bernie Sanders, yeah.
Yeah, I voted for Obama 2 times. I was in college, and but it requires us being honest, in answering those tough questions. One thing that sticks with me is, like, if you want inspiration, then go watch ESPN or Disney, But the reality is that these are tough questions, and I do believe in democracy and in the consciousness of the people, that that we are able to. People know, and sometimes I think we keep at this looking at these saviors, and they get the platform, to speak. But in reality, like, if you speak to my mother, she knows what's up. My grandpa knew what was up, about the environment and things. And working people know. But obviously, if you are under the water or just treading water, what time do you have to engage? So again, the transformation of all these wrongs starts in that fundamental place, the workplace, how you make a living, how you sustain your life. And so in order, so I'm not for solutions that these policies will tell you, we'll criminalize that, we'll bash you for that, we'll shame you for that.
I'm not interested in that either.
No, so I believe in the transformation. If say parents are able to get better worker conditions, they'll get more involved in their kids' education. They'll get more involved in their community, and it grows. And that's like a Marxist idea of the superstructure taking shape from that fundamental revolution. The flip of power to the people. you know, and people having the ability to transform society. And so I don't buy, you know, good, courageous, great, but that's not a solution.
But what isn't the solution?
Greta Thunberg, you know, it's good headlines, you know,
she
but
is not a solution.
No, I mean, she's not going that far.
No.
I
don't think that she is saying that she is the solution. I think
she doesn't even talk about the solution.
Yeah.
Huh?
She doesn't talk about the solution.
She talks about
tells
the problems.
us to look at the science.
No, but the solution is working class revolution.
But again, I think people know you don't have to be able to read a scientific paper to know that the world is changing.
And those are Democratic Party talking points. But that's an important point. Is that just like you did on this episode? Is you don't think of yourself as promoting the Democratic Party on this episode, but you are. And that's the same thing Greta's doing.
Say so,
yeah, that's what you're doing. But when Greta does that, she doesn't have to say Democrats. It's a whistle for people to say, well, the Republicans don't accept this science. I accept the science. These Democrats accept the science. There's some, and if you get a better Democrat, you'll get a better.
I think we have to be careful.
But let me be clear.
I don't want
let
on
me
what's
be
left.
clear.
And I'm going to be one of the voices that we don't mischaracterize people.
No,
because that's not. How
I'm characterizing her as not the solution and having no idea what the solution is because there's only one thing she should say, which is get that conference back to Chile because the workers have to take over their factories, take over that conference, and that's the only solution to be had here. When Greta says that. Then we got something to talk about. Yeah. But she's not saying that.
She's not interested in being a political pawn for anyone.
Well,
right?
but she is.
There have been many people who have wanted her to endorse them. And there have been. And she has decided not to. There's so many organizations that have asked her, can you support this environmental organization?
She's Time Person of the Year.
Yes. But
who do you think Time supports?
Yeah,
the Democratic Party.
She did not ask for that. If they've nominated you, they put you on the cover.
Anyway.
That is not what she has asked for.
Then you have to insulate yourself.
She doesn't back it. She even has said, "I'm done with these awards. I'm done being nominated for things."
Then she has to start talking. That's not
the solution. So I don't know what Time has anything to do with it. You see, you're bringing it up like it's something valuable.
Because whether or not she wants to be used, she is going to be used. I can't speak.
But if that's like we are being used for anything, we can be used for anything. But that's out of our control.
That isn't out of our control. I'm speaking about one thing.
If people decide to put her on the cover of Time magazine, she has control over that. People can decide to do that, and they would put her.
Right.
That's outside of her control.
I'm not saying she can decide. I'm just saying she's going to be used.
I don't see how that's valuable to this discussion when you say that because it's a distraction.
Because you say that she has something to do with the solution, and she doesn't.
I said. Here's what I said. I said that she has never said. She said to look at the science, and she's speaking out about it. She's simply saying the house is on fire. She's not saying how we're going to shut down this, because she doesn't think she's qualified to say how we should bring down the house from being on fire.
But I see a problem here, like this, where you guys are doing both. You know, we end up talking about these heads, whether they're good or bad, when in reality we should be talking about how the fuck are we going to conquer political power at the base. And when I hear that from her and from the people at these conferences, you know, saying that, guess what, you know, this is not going to achieve anything, transformation will come from the base.
I think it's important to discuss her because she's not a politician. She does not, she's a student. She comes from Sweden that just decided to do something about the climate crisis, and she is a representation of so many youth that if you look now on YouTube, there are like hundreds of Gretas who are not Greta, and they're speaking up. They're like, this matters to me. You have 10-year-olds, you have 9-year-olds, people who have went to the Democrats like Dianne Feinstein's office, 9-year-olds, and saying that you're not listening to us as the youth. And we want more radical solutions than what you're doing, and you're not working for us. People that are standing up, the youth, I think we have to pay attention to this generation. So that's why I'm just saying that she is important. And she is done with the awards. She is done with being told that she is. And she has even decided to now let other youth speak before her. When they start focusing on her, she says, I'm done speaking. How about them? Let them speak. People from Uganda, the youth, people from Argentina, at the UN, she said, I'll give up my platform for them. So I'm just saying that is why she's important, because she is not backing any political party. She's not backing endorsing any candidate. And she has rejected to endorse other organizations. So I don't like this mischaracterization the way you're painting her.
No, it's not her fault. You know, she is obviously trying to do what she thinks is best. She's no doubt there's many well-meaning people, You know,
Right.
no doubt there is well-meaning people that think the Democratic Party will lead to something better.
I think what Andy
But-
wants her to say is to claim that she's a socialist.
Yes.
Right? I
Yes.
know, yeah. And I think she's very careful about not saying
Why
that.
not? Because she knows that capitalism's the problem. So why doesn't she call herself a socialist? If it like, why is she getting up in front of people and saying this is the problem? She goes in front of them and yells at them and is like saying, "Look at how you people have lied to us and cheated." Clearly, she doesn't get what they're really there to do. They're there to lie to you. That's what they're there to do. Okay. Oh, good.
She has not said it like that, but she
That's
has
what she's-
criticized economic policies.
But
yeah.
at this point, it's clear it's about capitalism. So why not be a socialist? Why not basically say we got to get rid of this system? Workers are going to have to take over. Why not?
I cannot speak for her. I don't know
sure.
why
Then
she's not.
I'm just saying that if she's going to speak to a problem without a solution,
and she, you know, if someone is developing their political journey just like we have,
Sure,
as well,
but you-
we have
exactly,
to also be.
But you have to
understanding.
be exactly. You have to be
I
critical of why she's being pushed forward. You
By
know,
who? She's not being pushed forward by anyone.
how did she get access there
Access where?
to
By-
these conferences?
yes,
and you
Time
can have
magazine.
access
How come?
to it.
How
You
come?
can. You can.
Hold
you
on, there are
cannot-
other kid activists in this country. Why is she being pushed forward?
Because she's the one who just went with her father. You can go to the COP conference. You can actually go and apply and try to get in. You can get tickets.
Okay, well-
Anyone can go, except not everyone is allowed if there's a capacity. But people have decided to do an alternative conference outside of it and bashing the COP conference. But I will say that she only became popular because of her own strike. Remember, back in Sweden against the parliament. So it's not like she was given access because she had
That's not a
connections.
strike. That's
She did not have connections, inside connections. She had her strike, and it gained popularity by a local news, and then slowly it built up in the country, and then slowly they invited her. People within the COP, they say, "Oh, you know what? We heard about you. Went and invited." So it's not like she had these kind of. Let's not mischaracterize.
But
It
again,
is.
for
You're
me,
mischaracterizing.
ultimately, I don't care those voices that are being pushed, you know, ahead. I care about what's happening on the ground. You know, how we're gonna transform
She is
this.
on the ground. She's the one leading lots of movements. She go every city
Those
that she
are
went to.
demonstrations.
And those aren't-
what do demonstrations get
grassroots
us?
movements are not also demonstrations.
They are strike is change. A strike is conquering of power.
Yeah.
The ability to strike. That's what we need to be talking about. Not who's gonna tell us again what we already know.
And
Well, I don't understand.
Eduardo,
Hold on.
the other thing to know is, look, there's a reason why we've been seeing her name all in the mainstream media. I'm not saying she's behind it, but there's a reason. There's a fight going on in this country over Trump, right, and his direction he wants to take the country, and what amounts to the CIA and the Democratic Party using this Ukraine thing, whatever, to try to take it back. Those same forces, the mainstream media forces, which are propping up the Democrats as a half solution to the left as something for us,
Yeah.
are the same ones pushing her forward to us. That's the reason we're hearing about her.
Well, then that's
I'm not saying she's to
that's
blame.
the mainstream
But
media.
but that's what's
you
going
want
on.
to talk about mainstream media, we can, but we're talking about her as an individual.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Okay, but she is a political figure now, and that's
She
who
is.
she's being used. Whether she's a small kid or not, she is now a political figure. And so I'm not saying I'm against her. I'm just saying I don't. She's not talking about a solution. If you're talking about a problem and telling people to solve a problem, and you're not prepared to propose a solution, then you're not serious. And so I don't accept the fact that a child can say, "Oh, this is the problem, but I don't have a solution, so whatever." That's not even what she's saying. She thinks she does have a solution. She thinks it has to do with lowering carbon emissions. She thinks she has to do with something that's going to
Budgets,
be
carbon
No, she
related
does
to.
not talk about lowering. She's talking about zero.
But you have to lower them to get to zero.
She doesn't want lowering. She wants like changes now.
Well,
Like
then you better
that.
talk about how that's going to happen, because I agree with her. But you better, if you don't talk about the working class as central to doing that, then you have no
Right.
solution.
But I also want to say that she has said that it's not up to her to find the solution. She said it's up to the rest of us, really. She's just pointing at something that we have all been ignoring,
very convenient.
which is the climate crisis. And I think that that's something we haven't been looking at.
Who is
Right? We, all of us, every one of us that live our life, we need to start looking at it, like doing something about it, and not just
What number?
acknowledge
What
it.
number COP is this?
25.
That's because it's been being acknowledged the last 30 years and been given false solutions the last
But the
30 years.
data has pointed out how there is a rise in movement since.
Yes, and in fact,
thanks to people like Greta, like Naomi Klein, like good independent journalists, there is a rise in movement because people do point that there is a
and
problem.
guess what
and
policies
we have to do
were put in
something about
play?
it.
Put in play to try to deal with that. all these cap and trade things, and they're coming again.
And that's false. That's not false. That's wrong. I'm saying that's wrong. You're right. I agree with that.
But that's that's on offer. That's the only thing they can offer. And
that's why we, the people, have to push for not that, but something more radical.
So how do we push that?
How do we push that?
Huh?
How?
Well, I agree that I am an anti-capitalist, and that's why I'm saying we're having.
But we can beg.
Go ahead and say some more. Let's hear it. Huh? I've already said it's going to be
organize. Right?
No. How are we going to solve this?
What do you mean?
What kind of organization? To do what? Organize to do what?
To go
a revolutionary change against this capitalist system.
Organized by who?
Huh?
By who?
The working class has to.
Well, then that's what I'm going to hear Greta say. It's obvious to you. It should be obvious to her.
Huh?
If it's obvious to you, it should be obvious to her.
She keeps pointing to the working class.
Oh my gosh.
She may not use the terms that you want, Andy.
Why not?
But she constantly
what is she
points
trying to?
to.
What is she concerned about?
The real change comes from the people on the streets. She's saying.
Sure, but listen.
She has said that.
And this is my
she
problem.
She continuously says that.
But
she
this
says
is
it's
my
not
problem.
The politicians that are going to help us. So I feel like you're still mischaracterizing.
No, you have a misunderstanding of what she's doing there. But either way,
that's what she said. That's not a that's not an understanding of anything.
Disagree.
That is exactly what
we're going in a
said.
loop here.
Yes,
but ultimately, I have a problem with people that have these platforms and then dance around naming everything but not saying capitalism, naming everything but not saying socialism.
Sorry, we don't have time for this. We don't have time to play dancing games. If she's so concerned about the environment, she's got to put her shit on the line and say the working class is the way we're going to do this. And it ain't going to happen from demonstrations. It's going to happen from what's going on in Chile or France, but even bigger.
For me, it requires...
I don't buy this. I don't buy that... But, well, at least what you're saying, Andy, I have to still get clear about Kenny, but I don't buy that we have to have people say these specific words for you to think that they are on our side. And that's where I think that this revolutionary movement, and I want my viewers and listeners to understand this, you will never be able to get this revolution going because you are so specific. You are so specific about what you want. Yes. And that's the problem. Because if you're so specific that way, you're in the minority.
What is your specific?
And the rest of us that are trying, and not myself, I will say that the people, and this is why I'm trying to have, the people who are trying to transition, understanding things, I think these things are not, if you go to any village or any place, you cannot just say to people, these are the specific things I want you to come out of your mouth. No. You have to really show them and tell them, you know what, you're being screwed here, and here's how we're going to work together.
And that's where I think, that's where I have a problem. I think that is a little bit of that thing that I was telling you, that is a little talking down to people as if people don't understand. Like I've talked to other people that,
That is not talking down. People really do feel as if they're powerless. You know this.
Sure.
Why do people don't stand up to the government?
No, but you're saying that you're making them understand. That's what you said.
Well, let's understand what I'm trying to say then. Okay. Because I'm not saying that I'm talking down to people and educating as if they don't know anything. I'm talking about empowering people.
So
I want to be very clear.
Can I say that about... That's why I mean... Yeah. That's why I am open about
empowering
me being a socialist.
About talk down to people.
That's what it's about me being a socialist and saying it openly. And this is why. Because this is what I think. If people want to engage, hopefully they want to engage. That's the idea.
Yep.
Otherwise, if we keep dancing around these
but the
words,
majority of people,
scary words,
the majority of people are distracted by life.
I know that.
They're distracted by life, by consumerism, constant bombardment
coping
of
mechanisms,
right? By dealing with their lives, and so it's like they're still to get them to a place to feel empowered. We really have to be able to speak in a way that is.
I agree.
¿Cómo se to
you have to make it accessible.
Exactly.
I definitely agree. I've talked to you about this, Lips, and about
exactly. Thank you.
Having some of these things trapped in academia, and so finding that balance of communicate or having people engage in this and into at least learning the ideas behind all this, because some of this stuff can be a little thick.
That's what I meant by when I said that.
But how do you do that? But that's different. But let's talk socialism openly.
I'm just clarifying what I meant.
But that's my thing. Let's talk socialism openly. Mm-hmm. And because otherwise we keep dancing around.
But you know that even the word socialism is charged.
But that's why you correct that.
People think of Fidel Castro and they immediately no quiero eso.
But then if you're afraid of that, fuck Fidel Castro.
All I'm just trying to say is what goes on in people's minds.
I get it.
If you put your finger on the pulse, you understand.
But you gain nothing by hiding yourself.
Yes. And Eduardo's not hiding though, because
I am not about hiding.
No, you aren't. I agree
I'm about
with you.
transitioning.
And I agree with you
about transitioning. people.
I think you said it very clearly when you said words like socialism, words like revolution, words like working class are charged and are not words that workers will ever accept.
I did not say ever accept.
Well,
but I know that they're charged.
No, and so that is a perfect encapsulation of why you are going to continue to tilt towards people like the Democratic Party or these other solutions, whether you think you're voting for them or not, because you don't believe it's possible for workers to ever come to an understanding that they run society. That's why you use a term like working class, because it speaks specifically to the idea that the working class has its own interests, and that's what unites us. That's why we don't need identity politics.
And I'm not for it.
Well, I understand your ostensive critique of identity politics, but if you don't understand that a term like the working class and people accepting ourselves as the class and recognizing that we are the only class capable of making this change, then it's not going to be about indigenous folks. It's not going to be about children. It's going to be about workers.
But I was
here's the deal.
A specific community.
No, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Look, if you want to change this problem now, then you better look at GM. You want to change this problem now, you better look at the oil workers in France and the United States, wherever. That's where the solution's to be had now. That's the only place. It is not. The children are not our future. Workers are our future, and children don't have jobs. All right. I'm just saying.
And there will be workers.
When they become workers, then they will be able to possibly do that.
They had the tool.
But more likely than not, they're going to unfortunately.
I feel that was a little condescending.
No, it's not condescending. It's just reality. You're not going to change this world through children. I'm just telling you. We're not having a revolution by children. It has to be the working class, and you have to get your head around that, because unless
a lot of children actually do work, I will say. We're thinking about the entire globe here, right?
I understand, but when we speak to the people who are being spoken to by Greta, who she's reaching out to, she's talking about people in high school and in elementary schools.
Everyone.
Oh, come on. Anyway, I don't think there's people little kids in Afghanistan who do have jobs, all right? But they're often farmers, right? Which is again a different thing than working class. We're going to have to learn those sorts of things. It is the working class in the industrial centers of the major countries, which is the only thing capable of making a revolution possible to take on this environmental crisis. Now, is the crisis only one through carbon? I don't believe it is. I don't think I'm not even sure carbon features majorly in the kind of crises capitalism is putting on the planet in terms of U.S. carbon production. I don't know if that's the major thing that's actually we're facing. I think there's like in terms of the biodiversity, in terms of how land is being reused, what we're doing to water, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Fracking, okay, how we pump our energy into us. Those things concern me probably more. But at the end of the day, the way we're going to destroy the environment is through war, because that's what's coming. And the Democratic Party is hurtling us towards such a conflict. So I think you spoke very eloquently here, because it is clear that the things that I'm saying, which I say are solutions, and the only solution, there's not other solutions, are the very things that you would say, we can't say that. People don't get that. Those are the words those are not words people are going to hear. Well, I'm sorry, those are the words you're going to have to hear if you want a solution.
What I mean by that is, and I've had this conversation with Kenny outside of this, I mean that we need to present these topics in an accessible way. And that's what I mean when I say, for example, when you say the word working class, it's not understood widely what the Marxist term specifically is this. I had even had this conversation with Jake, and Jake, another guest from here, and who is my friend, and Kenny, who I had this conversation with, confused the working class with, because he said that Elon Musk is working class, because he's like, oh, he works, right? I think even that, you see, it's a very specific word that Marx had to, and even when you say farmers, many of our viewers and listeners will be like, well, that's part of the working class. You just said right, and they're not.
They're not.
So that confuses people, and that is what I'm trying to say when I say...
We can clarify that, but that will take some doing.
But I want to clarify now about something about what you said about me. It's not that I'm trying to hide. I'm trying to make these things accessible. And by making it accessible, I don't present the words up front. I present the issues that they are dealing with individually,
but you're not
themselves
making
and their communities, and eventually
what you're doing is making it accessible. Is called you're absolutely obscuring the problem and obscuring the solution. That's what you're doing. That's not making it accessible. You're just obscuring. You're throwing sand in people's eyes. No, that's what you're doing. No. You're talking about the Democratic Party.
And I think we have to be careful because
our approach may be different.
No, we disagree. You're a reformist. I'm a revolutionary.
Like you think that your form, Andy, is my way or the highway. I've noticed, and you know what? I think that we can accept different ways to go up the mountain. That's
We
all I'm
disagree.
trying
That's
to
what I'm
say.
saying. We disagree.
But I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
Trying to get the same message. Maybe my message might be a longer route, but get more muchedumbre, ¿cómo se dice muchedumbre? Mass up the route that I'm trying to.
But
And the
but
routes
I'm-
that you're taking is a sort of a very specific and very narrow, you know, and that's where I fear you might be losing people, because if it's that specific and that narrow, you're not really going to pump up a revolution. And that's my fear with this, and that's where I just simply I'm for the workers, and I want to make sure that we sort of shift them and veer them into this is actually more empowering, and this is actually going to have you live a better life than if you're just asking for crumbs here. But in order to get people there, we have to shift the conversation, and it takes a long time for people to really shift the understanding. Look at how long we've taken with climate change, and it has been talked for a long time, and it's through conversations and conversations and bringing it up and bringing it up and bringing it up that we're finally having people, as I learned through Gemma, woke people, right? And I'm not sure if I'm using this terminology correctly, because I'm not sure about the word woke, but people who are aware, as I would say, right? That people are now conscious that there is, we're in a dire situation, but it's taken so much of the conversation because people are repressed through the media, the mainstream media, and other talking points that are distractions.
I've already said what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
You want to add anything?
No, I mean,
You're not
I
close
don't.
for me to pinch you, and
I just don't. I mean, I don't agree.
now, where do you stand, Kenny?
No, I don't agree that we should hide these things, and we should.
Did I
we
say
need-
hide them?
Well, you're saying
Yo
the
nunca
circle
dije,
around.
es que yo no
Well,
dije hiding, Kenny.
You're not being upfront.
¿Cuándo dije esconder? Todo este tiempo que estábamos
said
hablando
you
de
did
este,
cover-
en este
okay.
episodio, ¿cuándo he dicho esconder? ¿Cuándo? O sea, él me
Okay,
pinta las
you didn't
palabras
say-
así.
But that's what I'm understanding. So I'm communicating what I'm hearing from what you're saying.
That's why I keep repeating for
Okay.
our public. I'm not saying hiding. I have to keep repeating, because if you're understanding, that's a good reason for me to be redundant here.
But to me, I've seen, like, in my circle, that being upfront works. And the people that are curious will ask, and I'll try to do my best. And ultimately, I also make them understand.
Pero
that-
no estás
that-
de acuerdo que debemos de presentar la información también de una forma accesible.
Yes, of course. But then there's another aspect. We cannot get around the issue that you need to read on your own and come to your conclusions. Don't let me tell you. Because we have the same bullshit then. Don't let me tell you. Go read. Let's have these conversations.
Ain't no way around it. And I didn't even understand some of the stuff you said.
All right. I think, there is one more point I think Kenny wanted to bring up before.
What?
Your elitist.
I think we covered
Estas
that.
pajitas y
Yeah,
todo
yes.
esto.
No, just like overall, just like I personally, I had a transformation, of, save water, save straws, of course, like we don't want to live in a dirty environment and things, but I mean, it's gonna bring me back to Trump in this sense, that try telling, you said, people that are swimming, threading water, try telling poor people, don't fucking use straws, don't use small packages, don't throw them on the street, when they're trying to survive and this is the only available thing. The capitalism does, because like in Latin America, Procter & Gamble, Nestle, they go and they sell smaller packages to people, and they extract more money from them, and that's the only way they can afford to live. So ultimately, for them to transform their lives, it's in their hands. It has to be. Obviously, it's in our hands here. Like I believe that, again, like I mentioned, that a hypothetical mother or family, that if they're able to get better working conditions, they're gonna advocate. They're gonna have more time to spend at school. They're gonna have more time to go, and involve politically. So it starts from there. And how do we get there? Obviously, it's questions, because things have to get better. Again, if you're just treading water, so maybe there is, like, on your side where you say there are policies, how do we implement them? But we have to be open about them. We cannot pretend. We can say this is not enough, we need to continue the road and march openly, not hiding and circumventing things and hoping that we can pop out on the road, And so we have to march with our eyes set on that, the conquering of political power.
And I don't think any person, the working class, should be penalized. I think
Hell
we
no.
should go against the corporates. They're the ones. I think the ones that are the CEOs and the wealthy class.
Except when you tax their sugar. And you tell them you can't have vaping.
And did you
And
want
you
to
want to take your guns away from you.
And did you
The
want
guns
to,
you're going to need to take down the
do you want to
government.
make this episode 3 hours?
sorry. I said I was going to shut up. Apparently I couldn't do it.
God, can we edit
All right,
this out?
thank you.
No,
Eduardo,
but,
you were-
We're
I
going
mean,
to
ultimately-
get 3-hour conversation here.
Yeah, but I mean,
That we check out, now that you mentioned that, check out that, or go link some of those episodes
Yes,
that you
I'll
mentioned
do
and
that,
why
yeah.
you said that. I think it's important as well. But I am in agreement. I ride my bike, I carpool, I do my best, and I know that those are still not the solutions. I know that individually it's going to take a lot more of us individually, but it's really going to take it's taxing, I meant to say, individually. It should really fall into the capitalist class that is using up the resources and selling us, and really creating and fomenting, yeah, perpetuating the consumer culture. So I understand that.
I mean,
and
the reality, we have limited. We don't have choice, really. You know, we have what is given to us,
Right,
but
right.
we are sold this idea that we can punish these corporations,
That's
with
why-
our dollar.
That's why, like, the austerity measures, or in Chile and other parts in Latin America, or even just what happened with the Yellow Vest movement, which I will be bringing some reportage from there when I'm in France. But the Yellow Vest movement was it was ignited because of the rise in
Gas
petrol,
prices.
in the gas prices, and that is not the solution. So I understand that sometimes environmentalists will conflate it as the individual the solution is with the individuals, but really we have to look at the greater picture, because the polluters are not the working class. It's the polluters are the ones that are creating the dams, or the ones that are the corporations. So I do agree with you.
The polluters are the ones who are creating poverty.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah, I
agree.
agree.
We agree. Look, we came to agreement at the end.
Happy.
We could be friends again. All right.
Let's wrap up.
So next week will probably be Kenny and I. We're going to maybe talk about your ideas about socialism. You said you want some questions for me.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
But I think it's a good time to talk about your journey. You know, how you got to where you got to, and we won't be bothered by Eduardo then.
God, it's exhausting.
But he will be.
No. But honestly, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It takes courage. You are honest. You know, you believe this, and I also believe this. You know, and it's about this. You know, it's about being willing to stand corrected. You know, like I'm sure I'm still learning. You know, I don't know everything. I don't know the nuts and bolts, and I don't think I should be the only one saying this. We will all come up with that, but the fundamentals, that's what we had to understand. You know, because they're there.
Yes. So this will be ongoing. I think we will have this ongoing conversation.
And even though me and Kenny will do maybe next week's episode in 2 weeks, you'll be a foreign correspondent in Spain.
On the ground. Wear a helmet.
So I will be gone for one. I will be gone for a month, and I will be keeping base. I will be in France and in Spain. Yeah. All right. So let's.
Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you,
Eduardo.
both of you, for attacking me. Now, viewers and listeners, go on and sick then.
Congratulations, Person of the Year, Greta, whatever her name is.
Greta Thunberg.
Congratulations.
And we need to discuss payment. I don't do this for free.
All right. Check us out on any of our 5 platforms, on Bitchute, Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes Podcast, and YouTube. Please subscribe, rate, review, and best of all, share with your community, family, and friends. And we'll check you out next. Well, they will check you out next episode. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.
Nice. Alright.
I'm actually learning about
Just
you.
to give you an idea, I did call Bernie Sanders a bootlicker today.
Yes.
All right, that's a good start for this episode.
My goodness.
So
This is a little low, and I'm afraid that if
keep it as forward because it's the mic.
I understand.
Oh,
Hold on, Andy. Don't worry.
all right. I think we're okay. Yeah.